It's like, it's hard not to be very cynical when the number one issue in these elections for forever, for as long as I can remember as a Minneapolis resident, has been these things, and like the same answers every year. It's like, are a lot of people out there like, yeah, I've heard it before. Tell me about the people who have been rude to you is what I'm asking.
I haven't really had anybody be rude. I've had challenging conversations with people who feel that we really just need to close schools and that's what's going to address the budget, which is just simply not actually going to address the challenges that we face in our budget. That's just, it lacks context and nuance to think that that is the only thing that's going to address our budgetary woes. It absolutely will not.
We're rolling. This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
This is the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. We're going without the hat today. Many people are skeptical that I actually have hair, and so we're going without the hat. And on this special hatless edition of the Wedge Live podcast, Christin Crabtree, who is running for Minneapolis School Board at large, which means at large means everyone can vote for her if you're a voter here in Minneapolis. Thank you for coming on for your first post-DFL endorsement interview. I know you're really in demand. You gave us your first interview. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And we know each other a little bit. And I always appreciate, you're an activist. And I know you from homelessness advocacy. But
yep.
You are also I know you to be a very realistic and practical and concerned with facts and what is true.
This is true.
Yeah. You're a serious person. That's what I appreciate about you.
I try to be at times.
And so why would a serious person first of all, how many things are you involved in? I didn't know you were a mom.
Oh, really?
I didn't know you were so involved in school stuff. So how do you have time to do all of this stuff, aside from the stuff I already knew you for?
Sure. I think all of these things are somewhat connected. I am a parent, you're right. I have a son who is 26, will be 27 this summer. And then I have a daughter who is a senior in Minneapolis Public Schools. So she just turned 18 a couple months ago. And I've been involved in their education and in the district the entire time that I've been a parent, which has been a long time now. The work that I do with unhoused neighbors is because I am in community with them. They're my neighbors. And so I don't think of myself so much as an activist as much as just a person who cares about community, and I care about doing right by our neighbors. And, public schools are such a great place to pour into and build stronger communities, and they're really important. So I've been involved in MPS in various ways for a really long time because of that.
Is activist a dirty word to you? I will take it upon myself to call myself an activist. I think anyone who goes to a public meeting, a community meeting with a perspective and makes that perspective known and is trying to change the world, that's an activist. All the white-haired old people I see at neighborhood association meetings, they may not think of themselves as activists, but I think they're all activists. Anyone who is involved in trying to change things, I call them an activist. Do you not like using the word?
No, I'm not opposed to the word. I just don't think of myself as that, I suppose. I suppose being an activist could be the same thing as being a good neighbor and a good community member. So I don't think it's a dirty word at all.
From the Minneapolis DFL convention, there was not a lot of competition for these seats.
No.
And maybe if you read the news, you can understand why there wouldn't be a lot of competition for these seats. You pay attention to local politics. There are a lot of issues. The thing we hear about the most is the massive deficit that we hear about all the time, and especially every 2 years around election time. Is that a bad thing? Should we be concerned that no one is competing, that you don't have competition? We know you're great and wonderful and we love you, but should we be concerned about a system that doesn't produce choices, at least so far?
I think for me, what that tells me is that we need more people paying attention to Minneapolis public schools and really diving in. I think we have room to engage more people in MPS, and I think we have room for more people to become more involved in what's happening in our schools. I think that sometimes it's hard for people because MPS is a separate entity from the city, right? And in other places like Chicago, for example, you could look at a budget and you could see how much Chicago is spending on schools versus what Chicago is spending on police, for example. Here in Minneapolis, because they're separate jurisdictions, separate buckets, I think sometimes people aren't as involved. And I think also many people who are not caregivers, whether you're not a parent or a grandparent per se, you may feel like, oh, this doesn't apply to me, when the reality is our public schools are critical to the well-being of our community overall. They are foundational to having a thriving city. So we should all be invested. I think also that sometimes it can be hard for people to want to run because it's a very hard job. It's considered part-time. It's kind of like the park board, right? It's considered part-time, but really it's hugely impactful on our day-to-day lives.
It's the park board, except with twice the fistfights, is how I think of it.
Yeah. Yes. I'm hoping not to have fistfights.
Maybe the fistfights aren't happening between. So I never watch school board meetings. Never. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those childless people who pays way too much attention to City Hall and has no time left over to be mad about what's happening on the school board. Are you the kind of person who watches school board meetings?
I am. And you know me, I am the type of person who also watches city council meetings. But I do watch school board meetings. I usually, if I'm not there in person, I stream them. I pretty consistently am streaming them, just because I'm a single parent and I work full time. So I have a lot to do. But I do pay close attention and read the agenda and the board book minutes. That's their version of LIMS, and follow what's happening at the district. I think that it's also sometimes hard for people to engage because school funding is very complicated. It's not very accessible. There's lots of different buckets and sources and complication around how things work. And so bringing people into a conversation around public education is really important, and something that I think, has been missing in our city for a while. And after the strike in 2022, myself and a couple other caregivers in MPS got together and decided we wanted to create some kind of a container for parents to come together and organize and learn more about the district. And so we founded Minneapolis Families for Public Schools in late 2022, early 2023. And that was kind of the beginning of bringing in more people into these conversations and making it more accessible. And even just this last weekend, Friday, we had a teach-in with caregivers talking about Minneapolis public schools and just doing some time together to talk about transformation and school closure and what does that mean. And so making that something that people care about and how they can see the way that the things happening at the school board are impacting their day-to-day lives is important. Because even if you don't have kids, you are a person that lives in our city, right? And so your tax dollars are impacted, not to mention things like public safety and what's going on in our community, all our economy, all of that is impacted by our school district.
So it sounds like a low bar when I ask the question to a school board candidate, have you ever watched a school board meeting, or do you watch school board meetings? But I talk to so many candidates for like city council, that's most of them, where it seems very obvious to me that they haven't really watched any of the meetings and they don't know how it works. So this is not a low bar. You are just, you're in the 99th percentile probably of people who run for office. You have actually looked into the job you are running for.
Yes, well, I care about how it works,
The,
right?
the reason the reason I asked the question is because are there factions on the school board? Like, do they have knockdown, drag out fights? Is there an Elizabeth Schaefer and Michael Rainville of the school board that we are supposed to hate with a passion? Do they
Not in the
fight?
same way.
No?
No, I don't.
If they fight, what are they fighting about?
I think there's disagreements on what is the path towards financial solvency. I think there are disagreements about what is the best way to do things. Whether it has to do with, the budget or looking at policy change around things like, cell phone policies in schools, those kind of things. We see those a lot. Or what are the priorities, right? Like one director may say their priority is literacy across the board. That's it. Another director may say, my priority is specifically around special education. So they may have to weigh those things out. But it's certainly not like what we're seeing right now at city council at all, which is extreme.
So, what is the path to financial solvency? Solve it for me right here.
If I could solve it for you that easily, then we would be solvent. But I do have thoughts on that for sure.
So I've been reading the candidate websites, and I don't see a lot of talk about like the 40 or 50 million. I'm not sure where it is right now, deficit.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of mention of that. And as a uninitiated person, I would have thought everyone's website platform section would have a section like, this is how I'm gonna plug that hole, but I don't see it.
Well, I think I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for others, but I can speak for me in that, we often we usually receive a pro forma, a budget that says, here's where we think we're going to make cuts, and then things change. And by the spring, when it's time for the board to sign off on the budget, those numbers are different, right? Even since just in the last week, the deficit went from around 50 million to 39.7 million. And so that is something where it's a moving target. And I think a lot of times the conversations that we have around the budget can be reductive and lack context. And so when I was talking on my website about some of the things I care about, for me, the first thing is really transparency and community engagement. We oftentimes in our district, and I think many caregivers and educators and staff at our schools would say this, we will have a meeting about a big change that we're hearing about from the district, and it almost feels like an attempt to manufacture consent or sell us on something rather than having a real deep conversation. And I want to bring the community with me. I want to be the kind of person that is accessible and that is meeting with people and helping to build deep relationships and understanding of what's happening. And there's a lot that goes into the budget. First of all, like federally, the federal government right now is not particularly friendly to schools like Minneapolis Public Schools, right? So we're looking at a federal government that is questioning things around diversity and inclusion, and we are a very diverse district. So we face headwinds there. We also looking just state level. There's lots of opportunities for us to address some of our gaps in funding, and it's not just saying, oh, we need more money. Although we are 21st nationwide in terms of funding for schools right now in Minnesota. I think often people think that we fund more than many other states, and that's not true, at least not anymore. But in Minnesota, funding for schools has not stayed caught up with inflation, even with the trifecta and many of the things that happened during that legislative session. We still have not really been able to close those gaps. If we were funding like we did in the 90s, we'd have, like something like $7 billion more a year in tax revenue in the state of Minnesota. Also, I think that looking at our budget requires more thinking than just we need more money. It also requires thinking about how those funds are used. For example, right now, the way that it works, we have roughly, I want to say, around 20,000 kids who live in Minneapolis but enroll in other districts. When a student, for example, a student who has special needs, open enrolls into another district, MPS, that district bills back MPS for the funding that follows the student, right? So we are paying out to go to those kids. However, special education is a mandated service that we ought to, need to, and deeply value. We need to fund it. But what we are receiving in funding does not align with the services that are being offered. So the state funds special education lower than what it actually costs and what we're mandated to provide. Then when we are paying dollars towards another district, we're digging into our general fund, which is the funds that go to everybody to pay for special education, and then we're sending that to a different district as well, more than what we receive in. So MPS is in a really foreclosing situation policy-wise, and just in the way that these systems are set up. And it often pits different schools against one another in ways that really harm all of us. So it's important that we look at how funding works. And it's important that we work not just in Minneapolis, but statewide with our public schools to come together and really advocate for the funding we deserve and the mechanisms in place to make that funding equitable and really serve our students. So those are places for me that I would look. I also really think, I think it's really evident, like the need for increased oversight and checks and balances with, particularly in our finance department, at the Davis Center. So that's an understatement of the year, but I think we really have room for improvement in that space. I'm kind of a nerd. I love watching audit committee at the city level, and I think about what could be possible if we were doing work similar to that in Minneapolis public schools to improve transparency for our caregivers and trust in our district, and also to improve the processes that are being used.
Maybe this has been all over the local news and I haven't seen it. Like I have read, it's a crazy story about the finance department and the $5.3 million owed to the IRS for failing to properly file some forms. And then what I understand is like $10 million per year in lost funding from the state in prior years, going back who knows how many years, because expenses were misclassified. Like I cannot believe this. If this was happening at City Hall or the Park Board, I would be losing my mind. But since I don't pay attention to school board, I don't know how to feel. But like, this is insane.
I am losing my mind.
As it sounds.
It's really frustrating when we are in a position where I would say, not just in public education, but in public goods in general, whether we're talking parks or libraries, we are in a position where those kind of spaces that pour into people that we collectively own are so often undermined by, more conservative, kind of think tanks and politicians who want to privatize things, right? So we're in this position where we really need to be advocating for these public shared goods that serve all of us well. And that means including oversight over the finance department, right? And yes, you're correct. It's about $10 million a year. And I don't know specifically how far back that goes, other than the superintendent saying years. And during the last finance committee meeting, and that's part of the accessibility issue. The finance committee and the policy committee of our school board are not streamed. So you have to go in person to see those meetings, or you can go read the board book and the agenda, but it's not as meaningful when you can't watch the conversation, right?
Right.
So that part is challenging, and I know that it costs money to stream meetings and provide that kind of service, but I do think it's important.
Probably doesn't cost millions of dollars per year that they're losing by being out of control. People bring that up every time I talk to like a candidate or somebody about schools. They're like, "Did you know that the finance meetings aren't streamed?" And it's still a problem. Still not streamed.
Yeah. Yep, they're still not streamed. It is still a problem, and it's difficult, I mean, when we have disinvested services, which I would say public education overall in this country is a space where we have not funded properly. We're not investing in our future, which is so short-sighted. We often are very reactive about, I think, how we spend our resources just collectively. And, so this is a space where when we are disinvesting in things, then we don't have the oversight we need. We don't have the public access that we need to watch the finance committee, to have the awareness of what's happening in the finance department. I do think that, based on audits and things that I've read, it looks like there have been concerns around some of these issues going back many years. And it is good to see, our newer superintendent, she just joined the district, Lisa Sales Adams, in February 2024. And since she's been there, I'm seeing that there is more action happening and more steps being taken to provide that level of oversight. And I think that's really important. And I wish that it had started long ago. It is frustrating to see because we see the direct impacts on the ground at our schools when we have these budgetary problems. We're looking at things like our adult education programming that is now being restored, but we were looking at losing one of our campuses, and that's just unacceptable. And so these kind of things really do matter, and it's unwise to not be proactive in that way, right? So my hope is that we can bring more attention to that, more visibility to that. And I really want to see active presence, both in terms of the oversight and the advocacy then at the state and federal levels as well.
So you did a beautiful job explaining the issue with the unfunded mandate and, the problem with kids going to schools in other cities and then Minneapolis having to send money out there. But I hear that from school board candidates,
Yeah.
you hear that from state legislative candidates. You hear that from school board candidates, and it's still a problem. So,
Yes.
should I be skeptical that is actually the way to fill the hole? Because everyone's been saying it forever, and nobody's solving that problem. Nobody is solving
Right.
it. And so,
solving the problem
kicking the can, are there structural things you can do within the district to fill the budget hole and stop using one time? I mean, the one-time money is going to run out. Maybe it already has run out.
Yeah. Well, if you're talking about the ESSER funds, like the COVID relief funds, yes, those are gone. There are ways that we can certainly improve, and really attracting and retaining students is a way to do it. And I understand that people have been saying that, but it requires people to come together and really act. And there needs to be a strategy for doing that outreach. I don't know about you, because maybe you don't receive these, but I get postcards and advertisements in my mail for public schools that are not Minneapolis, for outside districts. I get them for charter schools. I think we have an opportunity to do stronger outreach in our community. We anticipate, when you look at the budget, they anticipate not getting a huge chunk of our incoming kindergartners that live in the city of Minneapolis. It's assumed they're not going to attend MPS. Well, why is that? We need to be strengthening our outreach to these families. We need to be strengthening what is attractive about MPS, and we need to be able to tell our stories, because for all of the things that we hear about challenges that the district faces, I can't tell you how much I have loved being an MPS parent. And I'm probably a little more mushy about it than normal because my daughter's graduating and I won't have kids in the district anymore, but I love our school. I love our educators. I have been I can't begin to tell you how important and how meaningful Weather's education, my daughter's education, has been, the impact her educators have had on her. And so there's a lot about MPS to celebrate. And I'm not sure if we're taking up space and talking about that as much as we should be to attract our families into Minneapolis. And I really think that we can do more when we have our students attending our schools. Schools are more than just the kids that are there every day as well. They're also a center for community, right? We use our school buildings for DFL conventions and caucus. We use our school buildings for after-school activities. We use them for community meetings. There's a lot that happens in our Minneapolis public schools that go beyond K through 12 education. So I think there's room there. I think improving early childhood access to early childhood education and high five programming is a way to bring people into the district, and then wanting them to stay. We lose kids oftentimes at those transitional years when they're going into middle school or high school. So what are the things we can do to help families want to stay? What are the needs that are going unmet? And when people are leaving, are we finding out why? What is it that you didn't find in Minneapolis that you needed? And was it possible that there was a need to be met that we could have been fulfilling the whole time if there was better communication? So I think there's really actionable things that we can do. I think also it can be really hard going into serving in public office if you're going in alone. So, we've had a couple new board members come in over the past couple of years. Greta's election in D6 a couple of years ago, and prior to that, Lori Collin and Abdul. But I think that, having more of us being able to sit down and work together and have answer some of these questions and really push to take action is really, really going to matter. And I think that having that coalition building and being able to organize together is going to be powerful. I come to this with an organizing background, not in a professional way, but being one of the founding members of Minneapolis Families for Public Schools, some of the work that I've done with Unhoused Neighbors, those are all different forms of organizing that I've done in the past. And I want to be able to bring that energy to the board and really move together powerfully to advocate for MPS, whether that's about outreach and bringing new kids into our schools, but also about keeping the students and the families that we have and working together in ways to strengthen that. So I do think that is a solution. We're losing something over $400 million a year in funds are going out the door to other schools because families are not staying in MPS. We need to keep those families here. That's very important. And one of the things that keeps families in our schools is retaining our educators as well. So keeping educators here. That means that we need to be competitive with our surrounding districts. If I can cross the river and make more money, then, I'm going to do that probably as a professional, right? We want to keep our educators here. And that not only it's not just about money, it's about appropriate class sizes, appropriate caseloads for special education and ELL students. It's all those, and then even just culture. Knowing that our staff and our educators are valued is really important. And I think that improving communication between the Davis Center, our people in our buildings every day, our people driving our school buses every day, making school lunches, and our families is really, really critical.
So I wonder, do you like generally who is on the school board right now? Do you think they're like good people, good candidates, people doing a good job?
I think that everyone who serves on our school board is a good person. I don't think you go into wanting to serve in a public school district because you're a bad guy, right? Like, right. I do think, I don't know that we all have.
Are they doing a good job?
I think that there are people that are working really, really hard, and I think that there is room for improved oversight, clearly, but I think that there's been a lot of really hard work, especially in the last couple of years, to really address some of these issues, to bring in more oversight, to have more accountability, to be more responsive to our community. I would like to see more engagement with community, more presence in our community for sure. But, I also have seen how hard people have been working to create the conditions for that to be possible. So it's, this has been a long, ongoing issue going back. Funding and some of these challenges that we face in our district have been going on for so many years. And you can't just turn a ship around overnight. So I don't want to disparage the work that has been happening. And I certainly am not going to disparage any of our board members that we have now. And I think that we can do more. And I'm excited to help do that.
Have we turned the corner? Because we're having, again, not to pick on you, but we literally have the same conversations with the same answers and the same solutions every 2 to 4 years. And that's have we turned the corner? Because I am tremendously cynical. You mentioned the postcards that you get advertising schools to go put your kids other places. I don't have kids, so they know. The data brokers know not to send me any postcards because I don't have kids. Right. So I wonder, as someone who is, again, not following this stuff and reading the headlines and reading the very horrifying story about what seems like just a tremendous governance problem at the school board. Mm-hmm. Like, it's hard not to be cynical, and I hope we have turned the corner. But again, I don't know. Have we?
Well, here's what I'll say. I actually feel very hopeful. And the reason I feel hopeful is because I think that we have a lot more engagement than we have in the past from our community. And school board directors cannot do all of it alone. And what I have seen is just with, for example, with Minneapolis Families for Public Schools, we have caregivers across the district in every school that are organizing in support of public education. And these people are brilliant people with backgrounds in all kinds of areas that are useful, right? Whether it's finance, legal, whatever it is. We have caregivers coming together and doing this work with our educators and wanting to work with our board and our district administration collectively. I think we really, as a district, one of our biggest challenges is that we are so busy fighting each other, and there's so much distrust that we are not able to work together in a strong, powerful way to advocate for our schools, to the legislature, to the federal government. And I think that's done us a huge disservice. If we're distracted because we're fighting each other, we're certainly not doing that work together, right? And I'm seeing more people coming together. Just this year, I've seen so many caregivers at the legislature working with the district lobbyist, working with the superintendent, and going there independently and working with our delegation from Minneapolis to get things done. And we've got bills at the legislature that we've been really advocating for to close some of those funding gaps that I was talking about with special education, to advocate for, there's a Blue Ribbon Commission that the governor put together at the legislature around special education funding and talking about cutting funds for special ed even more. And we've been working really hard to advocate for not cutting those funds. We have been looking at things like mental health supports for our students. We've been looking at things like, it used to be that now there's universal school lunch, right? But before, you had to fill out a form and send that into the district, and they would tell you whether you qualified. Those forms were also used to fund something called compensatory ed, which is funding that goes specifically to more higher need, at-risk, disinvested communities, right? Because those forms weren't being filled out, there was less tracking that was happening of our students who are lower income. So work at the legislature to address that issue, right? And to hold our district harmless from that shift in policy that happened. It was an unintentional consequence of universal free lunch. And we're not against universal free lunch because kids need to eat. That actually is, honestly, when you look at like outcomes and academic rigor and test scores, kids having free school lunch has a huge impact on academic outcomes. We want our kids to eat. So it's not saying that that was wrong. It's saying, this is also, though, a tool that we were using. So what are we going to do instead? And just some of those things alone would help close some of the gaps that we're seeing. So these are really just systemic things that can be addressed, and they're reasonable. And they're not just impacting MPS. They're impacting our rural school districts, our suburban school districts as well. So while you're right that a lot of these are the same conversations, what I'm seeing is movement in terms of real active work happening, both at the board and district level and with our educators and our staff and our caregivers. And we're starting to bring people together in a way that I think could be really transformative for our district and our city in general, because it does have impacts on all of the things that do happen at the city level where you are watching those council meetings, right? Like if we have, safe third spaces for students that they actually want to be in, then maybe we will see a change in some of the challenges that we're seeing with public safety, for example. Because if you have something good to do that you want to be doing, you're not going to be out doing some kind of a shenanigan, right? So those kind of things. And I think about, the conditions our families have navigated over the past few years. COVID, the uprising, the CDD, and the way that all of our school attendance boundaries shifted. And when you move kids from one building to another, that is really jarring for our students. So lots of changes. And then this year, with Operation Metro Surge and the impact that has had, our kids have been through a lot. Schools are a place that we all have a right to be in and that we all own, and it's our opportunity to pour into our community in a way that addresses some of those traumas and can actually provide new opportunities and new choices for people. And so I really think it's a worthy investment and something we need to be doing together. And while, yes, some of these are the same conversations we've been having, and I'll tell you, like I said, I've been a parent in the district for, I think, 22 years now, and we've been having these same conversations a long time. And I'm tired of having them.
Are you coming across people like me who are like, yeah, I've heard it before. Why will you be different? And obviously, like, you're one of a group of people. You can't do it alone. It's hard not to be very cynical when the number one issue in these elections for forever, for as long as I can remember as a Minneapolis resident, has been these things, and like the same answers every year. It's like, are a lot of people out there like, yeah, I've heard it before, and I'm opting out? Like, what is the reaction that you're getting?
Honestly,
tell me about the people who have been rude to you, is what I'm asking.
You know what? I haven't really had anybody be rude. I've had challenging conversations with people who feel that we really just need to close schools and that's what's going to address the budget, which is just simply not actually going to address the challenges that we face in our budget. It lacks context and nuance to think that that is the only thing that's going to address our budgetary woes. It absolutely will not. If we were to close, a couple of years ago, there was talk about, looking at the way we utilize space in our district. And if we were to close 22 of our schools, that is only 5.7% of our budget or something like that is what we would actually save. So it's not...
How many millions of dollars would that be?
$39 million, right around there. And here's the thing, that it would probably cause us to lose more, because whenever we close schools, we lose kids to other districts or to charters, because we've seen that happen before, because we've done it before. And then we still have to maintain the building, so we have to take care of the building. Closing schools is not the solution that we may think it is. The minute that kind of spend some time really digging in, there's a lot of context and there's a lot of nuance there. And I'm not going to lie to people and say, oh yeah, we'll close schools. That's the simple answer. There is not a simple answer in that way. And so there's a lot, a lot more that goes into it than just closing the schools, because then we have to figure out, what are we going to do? It's typically, first of all, schools that are closed are often schools that are in racially identifiable areas and lower income schools. So it's just initially an oppressive thing to do, a harmful thing to do. Then we need to find, where are those students going to go, and how are we going to pay for the services to help them safely make that transition and ensure that they have the care and supports that they need, transportation to get there, all those kind of things. And really, schools are meant to serve our community. Our community isn't, it's not as simple as treating it like a corporation or a business, right? Like, our schools are investments in our people. And so it's really important that we think a little bit more deeply and with critical thinking about the impacts of closing schools. What I will say that's different is that I'm not going in by myself thinking I've got these great ideas, and if everybody listens to me, we're going to get it done. I'm going in with community with me. And I'm going in because I know that I can be the kind of person that brings people together. That's something that I love doing and that I want to be able to do. I'm also going in with really strong relationships across jurisdictional levels of our government. So, while MPS is separate from the city of Minneapolis or separate from the county, there are things that we work on and do together. And we need to really deepen those relationships and be more constructive with how we work with our cross-jurisdictional partners. And that includes the park board too, actually. So, I'm coming in with, I've had a lot of conversations, for example, with our council president around public education. That's something that he's really interested in, that I'm really interested in. Met with almost every member of our Minnesota delegation in the last few months, not to ask for their endorsement, but because I want them to work with me on funding. And I'm going to do this work regardless of whether or not I'm elected. But it would be nice to be able to say, and I'm a board director, because it pushes that forward even more.
So are you a flat no on the concept of closing any schools? Or are you just like, or could that be is it part of the solution? Is it possible that is part of the solution, or you're just a flat no, we should not do that?
I think that there are certain circumstances where it's possible, but generally speaking, I am not in favor of closing schools without more. I would want to know going forward, what do we project those savings to be? Not just this 1 year, but for the next few years. What do we project would be the impact on the number of students staying in MPS versus leaving MPS? I would want to know, what are our plans for those buildings and what are we going to do? Because we would still need to maintain them. MPS already has some empty buildings that they're maintaining. So that's just, money out the door when we do that. Whereas, our buildings could be more impactful if we were looking at, there is something called the full service community school model, which was embraced by Nelson Inns, who's a former board member, and some other folks in our community in the past. It is something that can be really powerful, where you have different, schools are not just the school day, but also a space where community is coming together. Maybe we have Hennepin County services that are being offered out of that same building. Maybe we have, our after school programming in partnership with the park board. There's lots of different things that we can be doing to utilize that space more effectively than simply having an empty building, right? So I think that it's really important that we are asking really hard questions and being very clear about what the implications could be, either way, keeping them open, keeping them closed, and making that publicly available for people.
Can you tell people how inspirational you found Commissioner Jason Garcia's run for the park board? Is that truly what inspired you to take this upon yourself?
Did Jason tell you that?
No, this is a real question I came up with myself.
Jason's a dear friend of mine. I've known Jason for so long. Jason and I met in our early 20s. So we've been friends for so we've been friends for 20 years.
Before you were parents?
No, we were both parents. I was a young mom. I was a teen mom. And so I've always been a mom my whole adult life.
Wow. I've never been a parent, and you have always been a parent. Look at us.
Yeah. We both have Jacobs. Our kids are both named Jacob.
Wow.
I know.
that gives you an idea how long ago it was, because obviously no one who had a child now, which in Minneapolis at least, would choose that name. Thanks, Mom.
Watching Jason run was super fun for me. I just adore Jason, and I think they are an incredibly thoughtful person, and Jason is the kind of leader that I want to be, that I aspire to be. Jason and I don't think either of us were ever we're going to run for office when we were younger, but it's kind of funny to both be here now. We've always done things together in community, Jason and I. We have very, very similar values and very similar ways of looking at the world. And Jason is absolutely one of the people that I go to when I'm considering, big decisions or, whether it's policy or how I feel about something happening in my neighborhood or something going on in my family. Jason is absolutely one of the people I go to. So they may not have been like the inspiration, but they definitely made it seem more real.
I wish I could play sound of Jason yelling at Al Flowers during a meeting about how rude he is.
I'm sure Jason will be thrilled that we're discussing that here.
Did you see that meeting where Jason was like, "That is so incredibly rude."
Yes.
I've never seen anybody yell like that during a meeting, an elected official yell.
That is incredibly disrespectful.
It was something else. Yeah, Jason's got me watching more park board meetings than I used to. So where you were watching the city council and maybe the parks, I've been city council and MPS, and I know a fair amount about what's going on the park board, but not as much as you probably do. However, Jason has inspired me, so I have been watching more. And I think one thing that I do really like is, Jason's come in with, Amber Frederick and Kay and just newer park board members, and watching them navigate how to work together and watching them learn how to navigate that system and the whatever bureaucracy exists there has been really interesting and something that, I'm taking notes because it's going to be similar for us if we get elected, right? Myself and Shannon and Becca. So,
have you gotten any advice from people who have been on the school board a while, or maybe former school board members who have said things like, "Don't do this, drop out, this is bad, you will be miserable, why do you hate yourself and your family? Why are you doing this?" Have you gotten advice like that from people?
Well, they haven't quite said it that way, but I have gone to other school board members and former directors for sure. I've stayed in close contact with Colin Beachy and Lori Norval throughout their terms. They're people that I go to frequently. I also went to a training for newer board members, even though I wasn't one yet, that Uriah Ward from St. Paul put on, and that was really informative for me. And he's someone that I don't know him as well, but I've watched the way that he leads in St. Paul, and I hold him in high regard. And actually, there is a former school board director who is no longer on the board, has since retired, named Richard Mammon, who I've known for a long time, and spoke with him quite a bit last year. And he was really kind of a mentor to me when I was younger. So he's another one he'll be hearing from me, I'm sure. So, yeah. So I do talk with people a lot and, recognize the challenges and how hard this job is. But again, I really deeply believe in the value of public education. And even though we're talking about Minneapolis, many of the things that we face in MPS are being faced nationally in urban districts and in our state generally. So there are people I can learn from in other places too. I've learned a lot from paying attention to Chicago. I've followed a lot of what happens in Chicago public schools over the years.
What have we learned from Chicago? Tell us. You're bringing Chicago-style politics to the school board. Tell us what Chicago has to teach us.
Well, Chicago faced issues around privatization and faced school closures very similar to what we face in Minneapolis. And educators there started in their union, have really done a beautiful job of bargaining for the common good, which is something that we see in Minneapolis as well. And that means it's not just about we're not just organizing, or educators in this case, are not just organizing around their wages. They're organizing around things that serve the larger community, right? So housing, racial disparities, those kind of things. And we're seeing the same thing happens in Minneapolis. The Operation Metro Surge, some of the people who are really some of the heroes, the everyday people that got us through that, many are educators, right? And so you don't go into teaching because you're trying to be a millionaire. You go into teaching and public service because you care about people. And so our educators, organizing the way that people have done in Chicago can be really powerful for building grassroots energy and strengthening community connection with each other. And I think that's important. We see how divisive our politics in Minneapolis can often be. But everybody, if you talk to people who are public school families across the spectrum, people love their schools. People love their teachers. That is a space that we can bring people together and that we can build connection across divides. And I think that's really powerful and important. And I think it's a big deal. And we should be doing that. So I look at Chicago as an example of where people have done that kind of organizing. And I think we can do that, and we are doing that here.
I don't want to end this without noting that you canceled on me a hilarious number of times before we had this conversation.
Wow, you were part of it.
Wow. Just so many times. I lost count of how many times you came back to me and said, sorry, I know I told you I would see you at this time, but no, it's not happening. But we finally made it happen.
We did, and I'm glad we did. I honestly, I felt terrible. What was it because I had patrol. So yeah, we, even though the drawdown has taken place, like we are still seeing ICE activity in our community, and I am very committed to keeping our schools as safe as we can and being in solidarity with our neighbors. And so we had a new student orientation meeting that night at school, and so I needed to be there for that. But I appreciate your patience. Really, I do.
So when you say you're out on patrol, you out just driving around?
Walking.
Oh, walking. You're still doing the walking patrols. Are you seeing much activity?
Not a ton, but there's some. I mean, I live in Ward 9, and we have a lot of immigrant families that live in my neighborhood, and so we are seeing some. I mean, I think just last week we saw some of those raids on the child care centers, right, that were happening. And, those are things that, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of what's going on, that is impacting our youngest community members in such deep ways. And, it is unacceptable to me to have kids going to school, showing up at daycare as there's, a bunch of feds breaking into the building, right? And so I do think it's important. We are still seeing activity, and I think, my child's school is kind of in between where Whipple is and Southside. So, we can see people go by on Hiawatha. And I do think it's important. And regardless of what we're seeing, it's really important to me that our kids feel safe going to school. And we have had students say things to us like, can I take your picture so I can show my dad that you're here so that he'll let me keep coming to school, so that he'll know I'm safe? That's a big deal. And we've gotten, just at our school, we've gotten to build such strong relationships between, neighbors, parents, educators, seniors that live in the neighborhood that are out watching for the young people that go to our school. That's so powerful to me. And the relationships that we've built it's just beautiful. And I'm going to do everything I can so that our kids feel safe coming to school, and so their caregivers know that they're safe coming to school, regardless of what we're seeing in terms of maybe ICE vehicles. This has been traumatic, and school should be a safe place. And so it's really important to me that we're doing everything we can to keep it being safe and feeling safe, So we'll still be there through the end of the year.
Well, Christin Crabtree is the DFL-endorsed candidate for school board at large here in Minneapolis, one of a handful of school board candidates that were endorsed. I am hoping, I haven't even begun to reach out and invite more people on this podcast, but I hope to have other candidates on. You initially wanted this to be a group conversation, and that would have been entirely unmanageable.
It would have. You should meet the other. It's true. We have a really good time together and, get along great. And you're right. You would have been ready to pull your hair out. I think it was fun, though. We would do a group one. We've talked about going on the new boats, the hot tub boats on the river, now that the park board has signed up on that. We're like, we could do that together.
You're looking for social media material? Is hot tub boat is one of your ideas for social media material?
Honestly, I just think I've come up with a lot of really great ideas for the park board to implement that have not been received with any level of seriousness. And then hot tubs came along and I was like, great. Similar to some of my ideas, so.
I call them pedal pubs of the sea, those new hot tub boats that go about 5 miles an hour, hot tubs of the sea. Thank you for joining me, Christin Crabtree, DFL endorsed school board candidate.
Thanks, John.
This has been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.